A bodybuilding type approach to training does make sense if our goal is overall health. Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And when I make this statement, this may get a little resistance, particularly from a lot of the pure strength world, something that I come from historically, but something that I want people to think about. Keeping in mind a more bodybuilding approach still means that we do the big movements. In other words, you're probably still going to squat, you're still going to bench press, you're still going to row, you're going to do all these things. So I want that to be kept in perspective when I make this statement, and we're still would obviously follow the ideas of progressive overload. But something that we need to think about is that when you look at health, every single ounce of muscle that we gain is protective against a lot of various health issues. So we need to be extremely clear on that. That every single drop of muscle that a human being can gain, at least drug-free, right? A lot of people are like, well, this person is too heavily muscled. Okay, but they're probably not natural. Or maybe they have literally been chasing hypertrophy for 20 years. Okay, maybe in those cases. But for the average person who is only 4 or 5 years deep, let's say you've only been training 3 to 5 years, and you're not using any magical special supplements. You guys know what I'm talking about there. In that case, the likelihood that you will gain enough muscle to have any negative effects on your speed, your health, your blood pressure, anything is nearly zero. It is almost impossible. Okay, it's almost impossible. And so when we start looking at gaining overall muscle, what do I mean? If you train every single plane and angle, you're going to have more muscle. In other words, yes, a squat will put a lot of muscle on you. Of course it will in your lower body. But if you go through the trouble to actually train both functions of your hamstrings, if you go through the trouble to really train your calves, what's going to happen? You're going to have more muscle than just what a squat will put on you. Okay? Take the time to throw some leg presses and stuff, and you're going to have more muscle. Upper body, benching and pull-ups can absolutely build a lot of muscle in the upper body, and they'll even help build the delts. But what's the largest muscle in the upper body? Your deltoids. That is not subject to debate. This has been found in multiple cadaver studies, right? And even MRI studies. The delts are the biggest muscle in the upper body. I know people see my lats are like, those look bigger, but they're thin. The delts are several inches thick. That's a tiny little amount of bone, a little capsule with all that meat around it. Those lats are actually a fairly thin muscle spread pretty wide. So yes, your deltoids are bigger than your lats. So we start looking at stuff like even the upper body. Building all 3 heads of the delt will add more muscle to your upper body than just maximizing your lats, okay? So if we're talking about gaining every last ounce of muscle, it is a matter of, am I training all 3 heads of the delt? Obviously you want your lats to grow, they're a big muscle. Am I going in and training the long head of my tricep, the biggest head of my tricep, in addition to the lateral and medial head that the bench, for example, in closed grip bench work more effectively, okay? If we're going through and we are capitalizing on every single muscle in the body, and we are in the pursuit of muscle mass and getting as much muscle as you can everywhere, your side delts, the long head of your tricep, your hamstrings, your calves, everything, you are going to have more overall muscle. You're going to have more overall muscle. What do we see based upon the research? Weightlifting beats cardio for cardiovascular health by a small margin. I want to be clear. This is what meta-analysis and large-scale studies have shown. Okay? Resistance training is better for your heart when stacked only one or the other. Now, I want to be clear that the data also showed when you do both, it's even better. Okay? So it's something like cardio gives you about 80% of the health benefits that weight training does for that. But when you add cardio to the weight training, there is a larger effect. But resistance training itself, gaining muscle, obviously helps bone density and all that, but that can be done purely actually with the big movements. The strength training will maximize that. So on the bone density end, the bodybuilding, what I'm saying, isn't necessarily better. But when we start looking at all the other factors, how about diabetes risk? How about cancer risks? The data is very, very clear. Muscle mass itself is protective against diabetes. Muscle mass itself is protective against most forms of cancer, literally through the exact same pathway, insulin control. Okay? In other words, muscle mass is protective against elevated insulin levels. Now, people say, couldn't I just do a low-carb diet? That is actually less protective than muscle mass. Okay? I want to be clear on that. Studies have also consistently shown, and data shows, that people who barely resistance train or barely exercise, who follow even deep ketogenic diets, still have higher circulating levels of insulin than people who do lots of resistance training with large amounts of muscle who eat a carb-based diet. You still have less insulin response. In fact, at that point, insulin becomes extremely beneficial because it's anabolic, helps you gain even more muscle. Even though you produce a lot less of it, it is an anabolic hormone, arguably the most anabolic hormone. So what we find is that the little bit of insulin you do produce, your body just needs less of it to fuel your muscles, so it makes less because it shuttles carbohydrates in. But the bit of it that you do produce, where do you think most of it then goes? Towards your muscle tissue. Your muscles become a blood sugar and an insulin sink. They keep your levels actually considerably lower, right? They keep the circulating insulin and your fasting glucose lower than even if you did an extremely low-carb diet while doing a higher carb diet. Okay? It is protective. Therefore, it makes it protective against cancer, diabetes. Then we come over to, as we get older and older, sarcopenia is a killer later in life. Well, if we've gained as much muscle as possible and we've kept our muscles fit and we continue to do that into old age, we reverse sarcopenia. So again, when you look at it from this approach and then the lower impact on joints, because let's be honest, coming in and doing heavy squats and heavy bench and heavy deadlifts week after week, doing fives like a starting strength approach or something, versus doing them with a little more reps and then filling in the rest of your volume with smaller, easier exercises, 10 reps, 15 reps, right? Joints last longer, build nice, strong tendons, everything benefits. This is actually a much better approach for longevity and health because, again, we are maximizing muscle mass throughout the entire body, top to bottom. Again, when I say a bodybuilding approach, that means you're training your calves. It means you're training your side delts. You're training everything. You're going to be better off in the long term. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.